What lovely shadows this morning. We've got lovely sunshine, but it's creating a lovely shadow in the background. I like that. Still got my mess on the table, but the shadow is nice. Um, so I was lying in bed last night thinking, and I'm only just out of the bed now, hair sticking up. First cup of coffee, getting that into me. But I thought I'd do a quick live stream on this. This is a live stream about writing, and I've done a couple of them, and I don't seem to be finished the sort of thoughts that I started, particularly in the last live stream about writing. I did two live streams about how specifically how to start approaching a novel, because I think that different writing forms are different. And when people teach writing now to kids, they quite often teach functional writing, which is completely different from sort of artistical writing, you know. So I don't know if there'll be any novelists coming out of schools anymore, but they'll change their minds when they realize it doesn't work, like, you know, changing how they teach people to read. So yeah, the coffee isn't in yet, so I'm not speaking terribly well yet, but it'll get better. But the thumbnail is awful too, because it's sort of thrown together and it wasn't working. And I said, no, that's good, because I can. That's one of my points is about style, right? I have this sort of ugly thumbnail, and like, why is it ugly? And but that's a visual thing, but it's related. But I also have text for my title, which is style is substance, and is in capital letters, which usually emphasizes something, doesn't it? So I'm saying style is substance. One thing is the other thing. So that's a big thing to say if you think about that in relation to writing books, fiction. That the style of a book, the way you write a book, and I've noticed there isn't a lot on the kind of things I talk about in relation to writing books on YouTube, weirdly enough. But I talk to myself about books a lot, and I think people should talk to each other about books that they're reading, and how writing happens, and styles of writing and things as well. And you rarely hear those conversations, because people have lost their my hands are heating up a bit. People have, to some extent, lost their ability to be able to talk about these things, which has to do with our educational system, I think, um, and the media that we consume. And the title of the video is a little bit like that Marshall McLuhan thing that I quoted it once before. The medium is the message. Although I heard somebody, a philosopher on YouTube, quote it as the medium is the massage recently, which was really odd, because a massage is a completely different thing from a message in meaning, isn't it? So if you say a medium is a massage, you're saying something completely different from a medium is a message. Um, but the medium is the message is a way of saying that the medium through which you are communicating, and there's a whole area called communications about how people communicate. Um, and it's approached in a semi-scientific kind of way. Because signs are words are kind of signifiers of other things, aren't they? It's kind of an abstract signifier of something. It stands in for something else in the real world. If we can talk about a real world these days, it's very popular to think of the world as having no fixed point and not being real and only being in your mind. So that's for another day, isn't it? Because that's related to books as well. You see, you can have so many conversations about books that are fascinating conversations, and save you in life from having to sit around gossiping with your neighbors about other neighbors, and elevate you a little in life. So the um, medium is the message really is a thing saying that the way the thing is communicated is part of, at least part of the message. It's saying it is the message. It's actually saying it's the whole message. But when you read his stuff, it doesn't seem to be saying it is the whole message. I don't always agree when I read his stuff. I don't always agree with it, but I am kind of arguing along those lines in relation to writing. And I'm only ever talking about writing a novel because I feel that different forms of writing, you get different tools out of your toolbox. I'm going to drink my coffee before it gets too cold. But this came out of this didn't ruin my sleep last night, but it didn't help it. You know, when you think about interesting things before going to bed, you stay awake longer thinking about them. So, this was quite interesting to me because it sort of came out of a previous live stream that I had touched on it. I had talked about the difference between two novels that I had written, and I was saying, well, the second one, it was much easier to write, and I was sort of given a couple of reasons why it was easier. But there were a few reasons, but some of them were stylistic reasons, you see. And when we're talking about style in a novel, we're not talking about, last time I was talking about the plot and the theme. And I was saying you want to get yourself, if you plan to write a novel, you want to get yourself pretty clear on the difference between those two. Because they're not things I hear people talk about very much anymore either. Apparently, a lot of people now approach novels like they're telling a story. Great, put a check mark beside that on your list. Done that. I have a story to tell. Telling a story and writing it down, and that's the end of it. And then the readers to come along to read the story. And then if somebody asks them afterwards, did you think it was a good book? They go, yes, it was a very good story. It was about this, 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 then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So they read it just for the plot and judge it as being good or bad, depending on whether the plot was engaging, which I feel is absolute tosh way to read. And you're missing out half the fun of the book, at least, and the point of the book, you know. And that's why I was saying themes and plots know the difference and know the importance of both, because the themes in a book are terribly important to a book. It's not just all plot. And the reader should be getting something out of that. But of course, there are all sorts of different readers, and that's why there are all sorts of different books. And there are difficult books, aren't there? Easier books and books that are like other books, and books that are very, very different and original and new in style or in content. For example, somebody like Joyce, who I mentioned, stylistically, he did all sorts of gymnastics in the book Ulysses. And that seems, if you were to start with Ulysses or to start with Finnegan's Wake, that seems to come out of nowhere. And even if you read his earlier books, and I will be reading A Portrait of an Artist as a young man soon, because I realized I've never read that before. I had read his book of short stories, Dubliners, and seen how that had influenced Ulysses, but I hadn't read the other one, which would be an important one to read for some aspects of not so much the style of the book, although it does give you an insight into how an author's style isn't set in stone, that it can develop and change over the course of different books and with the needs of a book. And it's very different in Ulysses from, say, the style of the short stories in Dubliners, or I'm guessing the style of Portrait of an Artist as a young man, because I flicked through it. But he also changes the style and plays with the idea of literary styles in the book Ulysses itself. And you can get very lost in that book if you don't understand that about it, because there's some very antiquated styles in it. But it's absolutely fascinating. But it's something that every author should be thinking about, not playing with styles and different styles in a book, but thinking about what style your book is written in. Because I'm going to argue that it is the substance. When I'm talking about the substance, I do mean the message of the book, but it isn't the whole of the substance of the book. But it does contribute hugely to the substance of the book. And when I'm talking about my two books, the second book, They Said There Was, which is a dystopian novel, they said there was written in a style that was very pared down compared to the first book. And it came out of the needs of that plot, right? And the themes, but mostly the plot. And the plot was that there was a crisis in the world, and it was kind of a slight mystery around what it was and how it happened, but it affected everybody. And there was this character, Robert, in the middle of it. There were few characters in the book, not as many as the other book. That was part of why it was easier. But there were few characters in the book. But this character, Robert, was a very straightforward guy, and the kind of guy who in society is a go-alonger, a go-along to get along type of guy, who really believes that society has his best life in mind for him, and wants him to achieve the things that it has told him he can achieve. So he is wanting to climb the jobs ladder and get himself a good position and be respected by the people in his community and the people at work and everything. That's terribly important to him. His role is terribly important to him. Well, what's this to do with style? It affected the whole style of the book, that central character, and the plot of the book, which was about how all those illusions that Robert had started to shatter quite suddenly through a course of events in the book. And his kind of series of shocks that he had that led to sort of an evolution of his character a little bit, and how that unfolded. So that affected the whole style of the book, because since the Robert character was a go-alonger to get along, he tended to be very facade-y, which is, you might notice this with people who are fitter-inners in society, that they're always trying to say the right thing, make the right impression on people around them and fit in with people around them, and trying to get people to like them and all this kind of thing. Terribly important to them, because they know that if they're considered different, that they're kind of shoved out of the in crowd, and they feel that being in the in crowd is the advantage in life, which it kind of is, really. Quite often they're the people who do get jobs. They may not go to the top, because I did say before that I don't believe in the idea of the meritocracy, that I think that's just a complete fiction. But it's a fiction that is told to people like Robert in that book, to keep him working like a slave within that society. I mean, there are different views of society. One that I read, which is particularly soulless recently, was by a guy called Lehman, who invented a system of note-taking called Zettelkasten, which maybe some writers might use. People not writing fiction might use it more maybe than people writing fiction, but I suppose you could use it for fiction. It's a bit long-winded for fiction. But Zettelkasten was a system that he devised for note-taking. But his system was based on, it's called systems theory, and he invented it. And systems theory is a system about society and how it works. And it's very anti-humanistic, because it's not a human-centered theory at all. It's just saying not only is the society we live in just a system, it's just kind of a fairly random kind of system, self-organizing system, that we don't really have any influence on at all. And when you read his books, you realize that his theory is incredibly bleak, and the place for a human in it is very minimal. a very minimal role in it. And the things within the society are not shaped by the humans, they're shaped within by the needs of the society. And whether the human wants something in it or not is completely irrelevant. I don't agree with everything he says about how it works, but it's very interesting theory and aspects of it. You go, yeah, you can have this theory that people have organized this system, that there aren't these people at the top who are doing their best to keep us all slaves like the Robert character, but that it's the system uh, doing it. It's evolving itself in a way and carrying humans along with it for its to feed its needs, which is very dystopian, you know. But the needs of Robert in the book for my little novelistic purposes, um, I realized quite fast that a person who is that limited in his outlook about things and does that little self reflection about his own needs as opposed to his role within that particular um, strata of society, which he is trying to climb up. So he's working with fictions that you can climb a ladder, you see, and have respect. He is working with an old um, conception of climbing a corporate ladder kind of idea, you know. So he's trying to do that. And so you kind of realize if you, depending what kind of a reader you are or what way you think yourself, you realize very early in the book that he's a bit thick, really, that the world doesn't really work like that, that he has some major misconceptions, and that something has to go wrong in the book because of this major misconception he has about how his society and people around him fit in uh, to that society. You feel, okay, it's unlikely he's going to get what he wants in this book because he is he's burdened with these misconceptions about how things work. He's quite dim about how it works. He believes every lie he's ever been told by um, society telling him, and he gets all these messages in during the book from society because there are all these important messages that have to be disseminated to keep everybody up to speed with the crisis and what's happening and everything, you see. So he takes all this on board and he gets in a worse and worse mess. And I won't do the spoiler because I always say I won't do the spoiler, but it becomes a very interesting situation. But he, as a person, he had to be written a particular way. And the narrator in that second book, they said there was, is written in his voice. So it's looking at the world from his view, and yet it's not really. So part of the style of your book is who the narrator is. That'll fit into part of the style because it influences the style so much. So sometimes when you're separating out aspects of the style, you might not be just talking about what way you construct sentences or paragraphs, which is what I'm seeing when people are talking about style. This is what they're talking about. But the overall feel of the book comes about through the style as well. And I see people talking about that less, about atmosphere in books and how style influences atmosphere. But Robert in that book, his character, as conveyed through words, which are, you know, just signs of something else that you're communicating, the words he used and the style he had of speaking, as well as what he is actually saying, influenced the whole atmosphere of the book and the whole content of the book. Because the plot of the book, I've told you a bit about the plot of the book, but the theme of the book is about somebody's belief system being shattered. What happens when somebody's beliefs are completely shattered? Do they rebuild or what happens? That's the theme. And, you know, I did to go into a longer discussion in the previous live stream about how important the difference between the plot and the theme is, and how you have to really get a handle on both when you're writing a novel. So he speaks in a very cardboard cutouty, I would call it, kind of way, because he is one of those people who parrot things they've heard in other places in order to please. So he thinks if he learns his role really well and he parrots what he's heard elsewhere by people who are popular or successful, or who people listen to and respect, that that will confer respect on him and status on him, and status is very important within the society that he desperately wants to do well in. And he does very much see it as a thing where you do have to work very hard to do well. And I mean, he's right in a lot of things, you know, about that society. He knows the rules, you know, he knows the rules, but he doesn't know that a lot of the rules are made up to just to get you to do things to make life convenient for other people who are, you know, much higher status. And so he parrots things, and as a reader, this created a stylistic problem for me, because as a reader you could get very quickly sick of that, because you go, oh, he's so one-dimensional as a character. He's boring for the reader to read, but he's not actually boring, because the plot is so interesting that him being so predictable in kind of his responses and everything becomes very funny, but pathetic as well. And this is part of the substance of the book, because the style is the substance. Remember, according to my title there, I had style is substance. So, you know, it's not the whole of the substance, but his language and everything, and his very stereotypical way of reacting to things, it becomes the substance of the plot, where you realize that that isn't going to get him through the situation very well, that something dreadful is going to happen because he believes everything he's being told. But it becomes very interesting to us then, because we know there's going to be a disaster for him personally. There's a crisis already. That's a crisis that's mirrored by his personal crisis. And his personal crisis has to do with his relationship, because he's married. And his wife does not have a similar outlook about the society that he does. And it's all expressed through, and comes to the fore through, the crisis that's happening in this basically dystopian novel. It's not pure science fiction, because speaking of style again, it's not pure science fiction, the genre of it, because it sort of could happen. It's kind of like reality, but a weirder kind of reality. So it's within the realms of the possible. So that's not everything about style, but I'm talking about style in relation to characters. How you convey action, how you convey atmosphere is through and how you convey character itself is through your style. So that's written in a very flat style, and it's interrupted in a shocking way sometimes by him. He's not a guy that curses very much, because it doesn't earn you much respect in society if you do that in the wrong places. So he's learned to control that, and he's learned to really control his in fact, he's so controlled about it that he's out of touch with it. His unconscious wishes, desires, and feelings about things, because he identifies so strongly with his role, you see. So when his innermost desires burst out, when something, which is usually when something is not going to his plan. He's a guy with a plan. You've got to have a plan in a society like that. If you see yourself on a roll, you've also got a plan. So if things don't go to his plan, he can explode, and you get a torrent of bad language, which is terribly shocking in the context of how he had been going along, because it wrecks his ability to be respected by anybody or to be thought of as in control, which is very important to somebody like that who identifies very strongly with the role that they must appear to be in all the time for other people in order, in their own eyes, to earn respect from other people, you see. So he's a very interesting character. And although this point, I think, is very good one for writers to think about, although he's not a sympathetic character in any way from the beginning, it's later on, perhaps, I think the reader's sympathy would be evoked because more things happen to him. It gets worse, and you would have to be a block of stone not to have sympathy for that person, and you should, because it's part of the theme as well about being human, what it is to be human, and to genuinely be genuine with each other, So when things don't go to plan, his role shatters a bit. But when he's in his role, he talks in a particular style, he acts in a particular style, and this all comes across on the page. So the style of the book gives it its whole atmosphere, and its whole atmosphere is, at the beginning, you get to hate that character quite fast at the beginning, is my idea in the book. But it's interesting that you don't. I did read a book about writing recently. I haven't finished it yet, but it talked about identifying with the character and what a tragedy it is if a character in a movie or something dies because you've identified with them and you have to find somebody else to identify with. And the thing is, we can identify with really rotten characters. We might say with this character, hopefully we would say with this character, I'm not like him at all. But I know a lot of people like him, although we don't identify with all his very role-playing, straitjackety ways of behaving in life, we learn to love what's happening to him. So the plot has us identifying with the characters because it's interesting what's happening, you see. And although there are other characters in it, and there's one other main character in the first half of the book, and then another character turns up. There's another few characters. There's a few characters you wouldn't identify with at all. So there's a couple of really kind of unlikable characters in it, and a couple of characters that I think you would like as characters, but there isn't always somebody nice to identify with, but you can still really enjoy a really rotten to the core character. I mean, somebody like Dostoevsky would have known that. You have characters of his doing absolutely awful things, and in the middle of the books, no redeeming features at all. And I was talking about that Proust, volume 7, I think it is, of the Proust, and in The Captive. Neither of them in The Captive, the main two characters, are particularly likable in that, although for Proust, and he did what I did in the first novel, he adopted a first person narrator in it. So he put himself in the novel, and it's Marcel is one of the characters in the book, and it wouldn't be completely autobiographical, but there'd be some elements that are. And I was talking about what a great device that is for helping you with a novel. It ties you down to, it's a constraint as well. But all devices in a novel are a constraint. So is a constraint you want to work with. It wasn't for my second, you see. I wanted to have a particular story I was telling, and the kind of narrator in it had to be this guy that I made up, Robert, because he's a particular kind of person that I knew very well. Actually, I knew him so well, and he was such a joy to write about. And he's such a joy to read about because you know people like this, and they might really get in your nerves, or you might not realize how much they get in your nerves. And when you meet Robert, you go, yeah, they really are a pain in the neck. People like that, they're such a pain in the neck, and you can enjoy hating them, you see. So every time he comes out with some ridiculous platitude, or some saying that is showing how he's identifying with his role, you can go, what a twit, and really enjoy that aspect of it, but be enjoying seeing what disasters lies ahead for him. And there are several disasters that lie ahead for him, and it just gets worse and worse for a while. So it's wonderful. I thought it was such fun to write. um and this whole style of the book supports that. So style is conveyed through words, and atmosphere is conveyed through words, isn't it? You've got words to work with for a book. So sometimes people talk about style when they're not talking about the mechanics of putting sentences and paragraphs together. They're talking about finding your style. You see, as if you're going to, like, if you were Joyce, you're going to write Ulysses, and then every book after it is going to be written in the style of Ulysses or something, which has multiple styles in it. But it doesn't allow, when people talk like that, it doesn't allow for the fact that your style conforms to the needs of what it is you're conveying. You say the words are just the medium through which you're doing it, and you're conveying a particular thing. So the style is going to change. And it's just as ridiculous when I have a painting there behind me, when people apply it to art as well. And you're not going to find your style and then stick to it. Like, that's an abstract piece, and I do a lot of figurative work, but I have another abstract piece over here, and that's actually about Proust. When I was reading that volume of Proust, he just knocks me out. His style is so beautiful. The way he writes is so beautiful, and is at least part of the substance of the plot, because you would not be interested in following his plot if he could not convey those ideas in beautiful language, but also beautiful metaphors and beautiful ideas. So one of the episodes in The Captive, I immortalized further in a painting, and it turned up that this little passage in that book, I actually did a little puzzle about it on my other channel, because it just wowed me so much. This passage, in the book has been written about by various people on blogs and everything online, because it affected people so deeply. That's what style does for you. Style is so important in a book, and should be something that isn't kind of mechanically thought out, but is flowing out of you through, as part of your art form that uh, the muse inspired you with. It needs to be polished and everything, like beautiful jewel, and it needs to mesh with all the needs of the plot and everything, and be a little bit thought about, but at the same time, it's the magic is in there in the style. So that painting, I'm just looking at it, it's about color more than structure, because it's an abstract piece. But that passage, stylistically, there was a little story that Proust was telling as a kind of a little um, tableau within the overall plot of that volume of the book. But this little story that he told was about um, a was it a musician at the end of his life, or an artist? I think it might have been a musician. I don't swear to it. I've actually forgotten now. Was it a musician or an artist? Because there are a lot of musicians and artists in that book. That's why, as a painter, I absolutely adore Proust. He's so painterly with his words, um, which is a stylistic thing, you see. But it's also a way, the way you think as well, and it's not set in stone. So what he did was he set this scene of a guy going to a gallery, and something awful happens when he goes to the gallery, and it affected me so much, that scene, that I did a little painting that's about the painting that he talks about, but it's really about the passage in the book as much as the painting, because between those two things, the cracks between the two, the style and the substance of the actual plot of that part of the story that he was telling, there's so many beautiful colors in there and so many little crevices that the reader can live in and inhabit and just love for a while before they move on, you see. That I wanted to do a painting about it. And that's what style does. If you don't have stylistic uh, outlook, if you like, for a book that informs the reader of really, it's like a bridge towards the themes of the book, because within the style you can have you sort of metaphors going on in this book. Stylistically, in this book, they said there was. I didn't use metaphors at all, hardly. There are big metaphors, maybe, in that the crisis that happens is a big metaphor for the inner crisis in Robert's life that unfolds. So there's a big metaphor there, but there aren't other metaphors. In the first novel, I had a lot of metaphors going on. Stylistically, it was a very different book, you see. So different needs for different plots, different characters, different narrators speak differently, you see. So stylistically, you've got those concerns going on as well. So they're definitely all things that we should think about when writing, and they do the help the book a lot, help you communicate what you want to the reader. There was a book I read recently, and it was that book, The Miniaturist, and it had been on bestsellers list, and I had heard people giving it rave reviews, saying it was a great book, really enjoyed it and everything. Just online, I didn't know anybody who had read it, but um, when I got my hands on the book, I came across it secondhand somewhere. And when I got my hands on it and read it, I initially thought, oh, this is going to be good, because there was a little premise that they had set the book around this idea of a doll's house, somebody getting a doll's house. And I thought, that's interesting. That might go very interesting directions from here. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I was kind of waiting for something to turn up in the book that didn't really turn up. Stylistically, you could say the book was okay. It was well written and everything, and the plot was okay. It was well written, but I think it was a theme problem for me, really, rather than the plot problem. I wasn't sure what that author was. Were they trying to say anything else? They didn't seem to be trying to say anything else at all. So perhaps it was supposed to be just a quick read, and um, had I not heard all the rave reviews, I might have thought, yeah, that was a nice little read, and just moved on. But because everybody was behaving like they were so affected by this book, I was expecting there to be something slightly life changing in it that, I would be thinking about weeks later. And all I was thinking about weeks later was, what was the point of that book if for those readers, that they liked it so much? I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. So that might have been a fake hype, of course, that, or it might have been the people that just love plots and books liked this one for the fact that it conformed to so many other plots. There was a bit of murder mystery in it, um, and there was this nice historical setting, you know. But it was a bit thin, I thought, in terms of the type of books. I do read very juicy books, but if you were a reader who just wanted a little plot and you wanted the plot to sound a bit familiar, and you to know, okay, this is going to be about a little murder mystery, and it's set, I know it's set in the Netherlands in 17th century or whatever. I think it was 17th century it was set in. and I know where it is. I know what era it's in. I can understand things in it, and I know what the plot is going to be. Sorted, you know. If you're that sort of a reader, that's kind of a Robert person whose apprehension of what's going on is very surfacey. You see, so that's a style, maybe. I don't know. I don't think it's a style in that book. I think it's. I'd have to see more by that particular author to see whether they in other books they're doing something completely different, and it's you're meant to get something else from it. I don't know, but there is a place for books like that, you know, for entertainment and everything. Um, but you want to think about what style you are writing something in, and you don't exactly plan the style out beforehand because it does need to have a little bit of magic in it, but it is figured out through the needs of your character. And the start of me figuring that out was like in the first book, where I did the Marcel Proust thing and had myself as a narrator in it to make it easier to understand the narrator's personality and not have to invent whole personality around one of the characters when I had a lot of characters in the book. They said there was Robert was an invention of a character, and because he had his role playing part of his character on like a badly fitting suit for most of the time, um, he the needs of that character stylistically were pretty pared down, and you dispensed with loads of metaphors, you dispensed with elegant language and everything, because a person that doesn't think in elegant ways is not going to be using elegant language. They're going to be just parroting things, and they're going to be a bit of a figure of fun, really, for the reader, when the reader figures out very quickly that lock, stock, and barrel. They've just swallowed everything that their society tells them to swallow. But it also is a stylistic hook to tell your story on as well, you see. But it does come out of the needs of the plot. So I think that's something that I talked before about theme versus plot. And this time I was talking about style is substance, or at least part of substance. It isn't the whole of the substance, because the plot and the theme are part of the substance of the book as well. Uh, but, you know, the style is part of the substance, you know. So the style involves what way you use language in your book to convey atmosphere. And the whole atmosphere of a book is terribly important as well. You know, it can be sort of part of the main theme or sub theme of the book, you know. So let me think, is there anything else I thought that was earth-shatteringly good thought about writing? I think my thought about doing these kind of live streams for writers is that people don't talk enough about this. They talk about functional writing a lot, but they don't talk about these concerns about putting a novel together. They might talk about what you want characters to do and why you're making a plot a particular way and everything, but they don't talk about the mechanics of how you do that. So you're not bringing the magic part together with the plot part. And I'm talking about how do you bring the magic together with the plot. And I think that's a very important conversation. And I think also that not just writers, but readers should be interested and able to have these kinds of conversations about books, because you should be able to read a book and then afterwards say, what did you think of the style of that book, the way it was written? Did you get anything more than the plot out of it? What did you think the main theme of it was? When's the last time you heard somebody talk like that about a book, a reader? I've gone like fairly deeper than I should have bothered, really, going into BookTube. And people rarely, I've discovered, in BookTube, I know a lot of them are teenagers or just out of their teenage years. And maybe that's something to do with it. But I had very sophisticated reading tastes as a teenager compared to what these people are reading. They're reading for plot. And they then when they're finished, they're supposed to be discussing books, but when they're finished, they go, "I want to say I liked it, but I didn't really like it. It was okay." That's their conversation about the book. That's so limited. They're clearly getting very little out of the book. They're reading the wrong books in the first place to get anything out of, because the books are about plot and not about themes or anything. And okay, that's okay sometimes. Somebody like I mentioned Stephen King before. Stephen King can write a great plot, but he's also capable. Not all he doesn't do it in all his books, but like he can do it quite effortlessly here and there in books. But they're not all like good books all the way through, I don't think. But he is a master of the horror genre. But the first book of his I managed to read and really enjoyed was Under the Dome. I wanted to like him, but the themes of the books and everything, I didn't want to read straight horror at the time for, still don't really. But Under the Dome has a lot more psychological aspect in it and everything. And I mean, horror is psychological, but he writes really nice descriptive passages right from the beginning in that book that other ones like series, I think there's a series like The Dark Tower, just doesn't achieve the things that Under the Dome does, because stylistically he's doing something different, you see. But you come away with different things from different styles of books. And from books where it's just a plot, you just come away going, oh yeah, it was a good story, and that's it. But a story has to be told well. Even the first, what I was calling the first novel, the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, that was an exciting, daring do story. But the way it was told, if you're going to be a storyteller, telling a story, it has to be told in such a way that it's engaging along the way. And, some people are a bit like Robert, that they're so dim that they just need to hit certain points and they're sort of triggered into thinking, oh yeah, it's very like this, I don't know, Marvel film that I saw, so I like it because I like that vibe, it's not very, there's not much depth to that. So I'm saying if somebody wants to be a good writer, you need to think about a lot of these things and think about the idea that style is substance in the book. The two are intertwined, and your style is not an afterthought or a forethought, that it develops with the plot and the theme. And I've gone on too long and I need to go out finish my coffee and go for a jog. So I hope somebody got something out of that. As a reader, you should have been able to get something out of it as well, because how wonderful it is to be able to talk about books. To be able to talk to your friends about books is wonderful. Try reading the same book together and try having a book conversation that's about plots, themes, and style based on the live streams that I've done. You'll have such an interesting conversation, much more interesting than gossiping about the neighbors, and much better for the human spirit. Bye bye.